sleep in the night, but I know. Hell, I don't know where we'll sleep in the night, but I know. If we keep it together, we'll be safe and sound, safe and sound. If we keep it together, we'll be safe and sound.
I am the Rishi Jai Veda. So there you go with that. What brought me into this movement? Well, what brought me into activism in general was growing up in Indiana gay, which brought me into the forefront of fighting in my high school for things like tolerancy and acceptance and forming groups that were geared towards that and getting the school board to actually switch how they teach tolerancy. And so that gave me the activist bug a little bit. And then that was the same time as the first Gulf conflict, so there was a big protest going on when I was supposed to be at a convention for peer tutoring. I spent 3 days living out in a park with hippies protesting the war, and that really got the bug going. And from there I jumped from groups like Queer Nation and ACT UP, some militant organizations that I won't mention necessarily on camera, but environmental groups. I briefly did some canvassing for clean water groups, and every time I did things like canvassing and fundraising, I found that for me, sharing of information was more important than raising money. I'm not good at learn these things and give me some money. You know, I know that these groups need funding and they need that sort of support, but I found that it was much more important to share the information with those connected in communities through clean water and fracking and these filtration systems that are poisoning their water supply counties away and they don't even know it. And they're told they're safe, but they're not. Things such as the film Erin Brockovich changed me a lot, showing that one woman who lived in a hotel with her children could bring down a corporation. And it was inspiring to me. And then I took a hiatus and lived life, as they say. Worked in a series of kitchens. I'm culinarily trained, so working in kitchens and being a server. And then I went and switched and said I'm not working in the workforce anymore, and I'm going to simply focus on the esoteric, doing tarot readings and divinations, which develops into meditation and solutions versus just let's pinpoint your problem, which fits well with activism in finding solutions, not simply fighting a tyranny, but finding an alternative to the tyranny is very important. And then when I came to the West Coast, I decided I wanted to do something I was calling a kindness walk. And I wanted to walk from one state, which is Washington, all the way to Southern California, to a Kali temple, since I am a practicing Hindu and a Kali devotee that exists in Laguna Beach. On the way, I got caught up in San Francisco at Occupy and instilled myself very easily and quickly into the sacred space and the interfaith groups that were going on. I found that people need some form of guidance or leadership. It's not that they're all followers, it's that most of them don't know how to lead themselves, how to do things right, whether that's society's problem or it's economic or it's sociological or cultural. All of us throughout human history, we've turned to someone that has shown us a good way to do things. Teachers, guides, shamans, chiefs, we've always had them. And regardless of whether I want it or not, my skill set seems to fit into that ideology. I speak articulately, I don't use the same word that often, I tend to not and oh and as much as other people. After Occupy, I decided to write a book with a basis upon what I call the unity equation, which is very simple. It is awareness times understanding plus action equals unity. People love equations. They think of math as the fundamental building blocks of the universe. So when you put something in an equation form, it resonates better with them, and they can equate it to numbers. That then developed into my concepts of selfness, which is the perfect balance on an individual level of both selfishness and selflessness. So it's finding your balance. It's not someone else telling you how to be selfish or how to be selfless. It's finding what works for you and living that way, living by example. In the words of the Dalai Lama, I believe it is be the change that you want to see in the world, which is telling you to simply live by example. Don't just talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk there. And there are so many phrases that I dissect and I end up changing and altering. But what brought me to sleep was we were run out of the river. Since coming to the West Coast, I've chronically been houseless, which is a little, I've been done it before, but it's relatively new to me. And we were run out by the police. They forced some people to actually break the law by opening cans of beer that were unopened and pouring them out, which is completely illegal. I mean, they were not illegal substances at all while still unopened. And then I saw sleeps. I came down at 2:30 in the morning, and I pretty much have not left. I've stopped doing anything that would generate income for me. I've given up any, I see myself as a 24-hour, 365-day activist. And you have to live, certain people have to live that way. You have to live for the cause that you're with. Other people show their support through other means, such as you, who comes down and films and brings varying supplies and lends your knowledge to the situation. But you cannot, because of your life, be a 24-hour activist. But those of us that can appreciate the support of the people that can't do it because of their own reasons or their ideas or their lives or their culture or even their responsibilities. When you have children, everything changes. And Angie proves that you can, one of our also on-site processors, proves that you can have children in this environment and they can remain safe. However, would Angie do this consistently throughout her lifetime? Probably not. Malachi deserves to have some structure and stability in things that he does so that he can grow up with that idea that some things do last and some things are permanent. And it's not always mommy getting arrested and whatnot. And you can't have that situation. So I came down here and met with a lot of mixed reviews. Some people thought I was trying to take over because Angie shows up at the same time and so does Cowboy and these people that have put themselves and taken on the responsibility of organization. I don't like the word leadership. They're simply organizers. They are people who maintain an organizational skill and have knowledges that can help others. And if you're willing to be helped, the information's always there. The hand is always out. But you have to first be willing to absorb the information. And a problem you run into this is everyone wants to point fingers and say that person's being a leader and they're trying to take over. Well, the reality is yes, we are trying to take over because you cannot accomplish your goals if your protest is a big party. You can't. And so someone must take over. You can't look at it as control, but someone must help with organization. And you can't have every random homeless person who's just angry about the cops or angry about the business owner talking to the media. You can't have that. The media will not listen. They will turn you into a ridiculed farce. And that is not what these people need representing them. They need to show that there are people who are houseless that do have intellect and are people that are not so far degraded that they can't even function in society anymore. Every story you hear of the teacher who becomes homeless, well, she was a teacher, he or she, at some point. They were articulate, well-read. They knew their business. And over years, they've lost touch with that. And so you can't put them in the media eye either. I personally like to see some of those people in the media because it puts a new face. It puts that spin of there is anger, there is passion behind that. But how someone chooses to display their passion, their anger, the tyranny which they have experienced is up to them. And it's part of what Awake is all about, is don't ostracize, integrate. It's a better way, and it takes time, it takes patience, or it takes doing things their way, which is part of what Awake does. You know, you have a problem with someone, they get physical, you force them out. Who cares about don't put your hands on me? And you already put your hands on someone else. No one's going to hurt you, but they're definitely not going to let you continue to hurt others. And this is part of the standing in resistance of police forces. There comes a time when you don't have to be offensive, but you do have to be defensive. And when you're watching your friends beat by cops and tear gassed and rubber bulleted, something happens in your brain to where it switches to I am protecting. I am not assaulting anymore. I am simply protecting my family. And in the 2 weeks I've been here, there are people, same with Occupy, there are people that I don't talk to anymore that I really wish I did. But those were destroyed so quickly, you can't get information, Facebook, these things. I maintain a lot with them, but they have their own things they've gone on to and situations they're living in. And we will reconnect at one point, just like family does. Family is not always around each other. Give me another question, because I...
Yeah, so will you tell me more about the kinds of things that are happening? Like, I'd like to hear a bit about, like, the experience on the streets. Then why is there a need for us to have a place where people can have a shelter? And I mean, it seems like a silly question because it seems obvious to me, but you know what I mean? What are the kinds of things that, let me reformulate my question because I had it and I just got sidetracked listening to you.
It's the monotone voice.
This experience on the streets that requires the need for a sleep cell.
Well, having not experienced it as long as some others, but there are times when you're sleeping on the sidewalk and it's not winter, but it is chilly. And the sidewalk retains more cold. And there are two ways to do it, with cardboard under you or going what they say buck naked, which is where you have nothing underneath you and that cold seeps up into you, causing a variety of health problems, most extremely hypothermia. Even if it's only 40 degrees, you can still die of hypothermia in that. So health issues are a continuing problem with the unhoused because they don't have the readily available medical situations for people. You go to a hospital and if you're not dressed a certain way, looking a certain way, they will treat you as a vagrant whether you are or not. And they will assume you're not going to pay your bill, and they'll give you the shoddiest, most get you in and out care that they can. Same with clinics. You have situations like Occupy Medical and other nurse associations that come out to the homeless and offer these services, but it is not enough. It is not. Aside from the medical issues from hypothermia and exposure and just regular illness that you may be able to get a over-the-counter medicine for, they have to wait till Wednesday to go to the clinic to get it. So that cold gets worse until that. And then it's contagious and you're spreading that to others, not just other houseless, but other people on the street. And they don't understand sanitation and keeping yourself clean because their lives are literally dirty. And so body issues, from body lice to scabies to rashes and infections, staph and MRSA are rampant amongst the houseless. And this is something that people don't realize. And it's easily taken care of with a quick dose of antibiotics. Yet they don't have that available. Another issue that you suffer is the indignities of police. That from police harassment if you're just sitting somewhere, to the police rousting you out of your sleep every morning at 6 or 7 a.m. when you didn't even get to sleep because the guys down the street are drunk or you're by a bar and the normal people are drunk, keeping you up. So 3 o'clock rolls around when you finally sleep and 3 hours later you woke up. So sleep deprivation is another issue. People being worn out and tired. But my biggest reason that I quote is that if you give people the basic modern needs of food, shelter, education, and medical, which are the basic modern needs, the potential for us as a race increases 1,000-fold. Because no longer do you have to worry about where your gear is going to be or where you're going to get a sandwich, and you can focus on your art or your ingenuity or your speaking ability or your writing or your skill as a carpenter or any number of things that you cannot focus on when your only main priority is how am I going to eat. And the reason people fall into abusive, self-abusive substances is not about their weakness by any means. It's if you push someone into the gutter enough, they will believe that they should be there. And when they believe they should be in the gutter, they have very little respect for themselves because no one else respects them. And so why not pump your veins full of poisons and lug it down your throat to forget about that pain, to not focus on all the pain and hardship you have and just simply have a little bit of good time for that brief time you get with your friends before the cops show up, or before the businessman runs you off, or before the resident calls some authority that will remove you. That little bits of happiness are so incredibly important. Again, it's a large part of what Awake represents is not just the anarchist ideal of self-governing, but the idea that you cannot judge someone for how they have chosen to process the things they have gone through. And examples can be given of other people that have gone through the same and they don't fall into those traps. Well, at some point in their lives, someone handed them an opportunity. And something in their brain said, seize it. Everyone that has been housed and come out of these situations, and whether it's AA that used it or something has helped them, someone has helped them. And when you have no one reaching out, when you're a product of a foster care system where you finally get away from your somewhat abusive foster parents that never really cared anything about the check, and you're out on the streets and you find these surrogate families, and the surrogate family are Schwilly kids. Well, yeah, you're going to get drunk to fit in. We all want to fit into a group. And these are groups. They are no more different than a neighborhood or a political party or a religious organization. They are groups of people that have like ideas that group together for safety and for camaraderie. I have to pronounce that correctly because I always mispronounce it. Solidarity with each other. And so this is exceedingly important in understanding where these people are coming from, understanding the plight which they suffer. And it's not the same in this country as it is being houseless in, say, Peru. No one is digging around in giant mountains of garbage, scavenging for whatever pickle rind you can get or melon rind that day that's going to be a soup for you and your 3 sisters, or things you can sell down this area or that area. There are much huger issues in other countries of poverty. But you cannot point the finger at others until you point it at yourself. And the U.S. for too long has been trying to fix everyone else's problem and ignoring their own. And this is a bigger issue. Of course, this comes down to economic disparity, and it comes down to ruling class versus working class. And those are realities we know, but they're not realities we can yet combat.
I don't like to say sleep's demands, what is sleep asking for? What is your vision of if we had things right, what would that look like? What do we need to get there?
I would like to see the city lift their camping ban. The ban on public camping is a scourge to the houseless. And they don't have to lift it completely. I would love to see them, and you're asking ideally, so I'll get almost fanciful in the idea. I would love to see designated marked campsites with grills at each spot, large enough to cook full meals, not just a couple of hamburgers. I would like to see those designated spots self-governed and be allowed to actually have permanent residents in them. This city has a program already in place with these shacks that are built. And having one of those at each site, that you move into it, you're the guy that's going to live there all the time, you're the guy that then, or girl, that decides who comes to your camp. who's there. You self-govern, just as these camps are beginning to do. And it's taken them 2 weeks to get this organized. Imagine what they would do if they had a month, or if they had years to set up these little communities like gypsy tribe. You always go to the gypsy ideal. Nobody messed with the gypsies. You leave them alone in their little encampments. They're self-governed in that way. They are kind of the ultimate example of
very peaceful.
Ultimate example of
well, we occupy and we are representing sleeps, and the government has taken everything.
It really won't hear you because you don't have the microphone on you. So.
On the mic, so yeah.
I know he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, thank you though for your input.
Ideally, again, opening up Camp A, Camp B, Camp C, Camp D, all of these that are somewhat self-governed. And by utilizing that ideology, springboarding across the country to have the same thing happen. I personally would love to see, and I incite this in anyone in your community that is interested in it, it is wholly possible to have a 100,000 person march of the houseless on Washington. Every group has made their statement by going to the people that make the laws and saying, here we are in numbers. We have our pitchforks and proverbial torches. We demand to be heard. And to organize such the seemingly disorganized group of individuals I would weep. And I would stand up there and I would speak to all of them. And I would applaud them all. And I would weep for them. And I would take what comes with that responsibility, which may not necessarily be peaceful, because the whole idea of stop bitching and start a revolution is not necessarily violent, but as I said before, it is defensive. And at some point you have to say enough is enough. And marching upon the lawmakers, imagine the smell of 100,000 dirty homeless people in one place. That alone would make them listen to you. And that's to get a little funny and humorous in there. But the seriousness of the subject must be addressed. And it won't be addressed until that is brought to the forefront. And people say, I'm not going to hide at the shelter anymore. I'm not going to be out of sight, out of mind. And allow for people who have nothing to do with my life to dictate how I live my life. Many people don't want to be houseless, but many do. And they want the right to be able to exist and not be harassed. An old concept in Europe during the Middle Ages was come up with one of the kings. And he decreed, and it still is a concept in many parts in Europe, that if you owned land and grew upon your land, and your land was near a thoroughfare or a road, you were required a certain amount of acreage as free rein. So passers-by and travelers, which traveling took much longer then. We weren't in cars. People would take weeks at a time to get from city to city. It must be available, and there is no penalty for eating the apple from the tree or plucking the grain to make some bread. No penalty. And this still continues in parts of France and parts of Spain and even in England. The idea also in Europe of graduating high school and backpacking, humbling yourself to a degree and realizing what it's like to just have everything on your back before you go into the workforce, before you go back into education. In this country, it's all about make the money. And that's part of what's gotten us here, but that's also part of what's created the gloriousness that is the US. And there are many problems, don't get me wrong, and there are many things that we should not have done and roads we should not have taken. But if you look around at any given time and you realize the accomplishments that we have made as a race and as a country, and setting the stage for some of the hugest human rights situations in the history of all humanity, where we acknowledge individuals as humans and protect our children, our women, our men, our elderly on fundamentally law-made ways. Those are things to be proud of. So when someone says, I'm proud to be an American, they should be proud of those things which America truly stands for, not the things that America has shown the world.
And keep working towards making it better.
It can always be better. I have a Gita, which is, don't be sorry, be better. It simply says, stop apologizing. We do that too much in our society of saying, oh, sorry, oh, I bumped into you, sorry, oh, sorry. Don't be sorry for reaching for something. You needed it, you wanted it. You should excuse yourself maybe and say, oh, excuse me. But don't apologize for attempting to achieve something. So be better, not sorry.
So tell me, I remembered the question. This is probably the last question. But will you tell me a little bit about the camp itself? Like, I noticed that you have a library, you guys have a kitchen. Will you tell me about the different facets of what you're creating in this space?
We are, to put it, this protest site is creating a community, plain and simple, and all the things that your average community has. We do not have a corner store, we do not have a grocery store, but we do have a kitchen. We do have a place where people can go and get food. And our food is not requiring you to pay us change for it, or bills, or work on a trade system. The only trade is put in as much effort. And when we turn people away I'm sorry, we only feed protesters. It's much better to say we need to feed the people on ground, on the front lines first, and then we will feed the remainder of the troops. And that is the way any warfare situation works. Your food is shipped to the guys who are actually out there fighting. And then everyone who's back in camp gets the secondary food, or the stuff that might be a little less or smaller portions. And that shows them that they are accepted, they are welcome, they are taken care of, but they aren't actively involved. So get more involved and you'll be first in line. Get more involved and you will feel the sense of community that's there instead of rejection. They're so used to being rejected that that's how they come at any form of what they perceive as rejection. So yes, we have a library forming. We have varying camps. Across the street we have a little garden, and we have a porch in front of our house that we share with Marcus. And it's about creating a sense of community. And just like any family, people bicker, they yell, they argue. They even may fight each other physically at times, like the two brothers out in the yard wrestling because they're so mad. But that doesn't mean those brothers aren't going to break bread at the end of the day, that they're not going to have each other's back, that you insult the one brother, the other one's there going, what did you say? So that sense of safety that a family gives, that many people didn't have in their young lives, for whatever their reasoning, whether it's foster care or parents that didn't care, they need to feel safe. And people that are generally ostracized are sitting in tents talking with people that 2 days ago might have, wanted to punch them in the face and told them to get out of here. But there's a sense of coming together, of unity. And it is perfectly explained. What we are doing here is the unity equation. We are becoming aware of each other. We are trying to understand each other. Through that understanding, we are taking thoughtful action with each other. And that will produce unity.
Love it.
Everything's a pulpit.
I think that's good. If you have something you want to add.
We will not
I will add
ever stop.
a Gita, which is perception is 9/10 of reality. And I would advise anyone that thinks they know what the homeless go through, or what the middle class go through, or what someone who has no legs goes through, to meet that person, talk with that person, listen to that person. Because if you're not willing to break those boundaries, then there will be no true evolution. There will be no true growth. There will only be stagnation, which, as we know, breeds disease. So